Hello and welcome to another edition of ASBSD's videocasts. I'm Wade Pogany, Executive Director for the Associated School Boards. Today's topic is about school board reorganization meetings. We often call them the annual meeting that usually takes place in July. And joining me today to discuss this is Mr. Gerry Kaufman, Director of Policy and Legal Services, and Dr. Randy Royer, who is the Director for Board Development. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. We've been talking about the annual meeting and all of the pieces that that entails, that happens at the very beginning of the fiscal year. This is a really important meeting for boards and superintendents to go through. Tell me the basic purpose of the meeting. Why is it an important meeting, and why do we do that at the beginning of the school year?
Well, first of all, it's required by law. South Dakota Codified Law requires that the second Monday of July be the annual meeting or reorganization meeting.
Right. Yeah.
So we kind of have to do that.
Yep. So the statute prescribes that. What are some things in the statute that are specific that we have to do?
Surprisingly, there's only 5 things identified in statute. Most school districts have a number of things on their what we call reorg or reorganization agenda, but only 5 things are required by statute. First is the election of the president and vice president. The second is statute says that regular school board meetings are to be held the second Monday of the month unless designated otherwise at the reorganization meeting. So it is a time when occasionally you'll see a school board maybe meet on Tuesdays of the second week, in the month for whatever reason. Third is the designation of depositories, the school funding, school accounts. Fourth is the designation of the custodian of those accounts. And the fifth thing that's required by statute is the designation of the legal newspaper.
Yeah. So all those things are very prescriptive in law, even though there are a lot of things that go with that. So tell me or describe some basic procedures that a board would go through at the very beginning of this annual meeting. What are some steps that they need to do?
Well, one of the first things is the business manager typically calls the meeting to order. Sometimes it's the superintendent, but usually it's the business manager. And the next step after that is to give the oath of office to newly elected or re-elected school board members for their next term. So that establishes then a board. And then after establishing the board, you elect the president and the vice president. After the president is elected, then he basically takes over the meeting.
Yeah. So it's really a process by giving the board authority to organize them,
Yes.
Hence the reorganization meeting. And then once they take their oath of office, then they're officially seated at that point. And then the rest of the procedure takes effect based on whatever their policies are. So in addition to the elements that are prescribed in law, what are some other common decisions that boards make at this particular meeting? Are there some examples of that?
There's a number of examples, but probably a couple of the most typical, and I know Randy has some to add as well. One is that there's basically board member assignments. You will oftentimes see where boards will have designated what I would call standing committees, maybe a negotiations committee, maybe a facility and grounds committee, or a transportation committee, or a policy review committee, or whatever. And so then, of course, depending upon the size of the board, if it's a 5, 7, or 9-member board, the number of people on that committee may vary based upon the size of the school district and the number of board members they have. But the board chair or president will a lot of times either ask for volunteers or have made decisions in terms of you are appointed to this committee, etc. So between the appointments, and then you can go not only outside or inside the school board committee assignments, but outside board representatives. Ed co-ops would be an example, where local school boards will have a board member appointed to the ed co-op board, would be one type of example.
Or equalization boards, county tax equalization boards. And these are very important because when you think about it, individual board members really have no authority. The only authority they have is at the board table with the other board members, right, unless designated. So this is a time when the board designates 2 individual board members. You are acting as our authority at these other boards that representing the school board.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Another, example where it's not prescribed by statute, but you very commonly see it in reorganization meetings, is the designation of a local school district attorney or attorneys. Most school districts by far will appoint one school district attorney. Maybe they will appoint a firm, but they'll designate, a specific attorney within that firm. A few school districts appoint more than one attorney or more than one law firm for whatever specific reasons they may wish. But that would be another very common example of something you see at reorganization meetings.
Is there, it sounds like there are a lot of decisions that have to be made at this meeting. Is there some kind of a checklist or something that boards can refer to if they want to make sure they're taking care of all of the legally prescribed things? And there are other things in statute too that they need to do that they could do at this meeting or other ways. Is there a checklist somewhere they can refer to?
Well, at ASBSD, we do have a sample policy. It's policy BCA. It's in the process of being revised right now. I hope to have it out prior to the June board meeting, which means we're looking at it relatively soon. And it would include some of those examples we just gave. I would kind of go back to a previous question about things that are commonly found. A lot of things are required by the board to do annually, but the statute doesn't say at the annual or reorganization meeting. And those are very, very critical because by federal law, most of them are required to be designated annually by the board. Title IX compliance officer, asbestos officer, ADA, Americans with Disability compliance officer, Section 504 Rehabilitation Act compliance officer. Federal laws that govern school activities in some way, shape, or form. Those federal laws say annually, schools, you have to be appointing these kinds of people, and so it's very significant.
So it's probably important that they do all that at the same time then too, just to make sure
Correct.
they're in compliance with all the federal laws too. So we have a policy that they can refer to and use as a model policy, and you're
Yes.
working on some revisions to that right now, as I
Correct.
understand. So you would obviously encourage boards to have a policy that would entail all the pieces they need to encapsulate with that meeting then.
Very good checklist, just to go down and make sure you're covering all the bases.
Yeah, yeah. What might be some important decisions that they would make at their annual meeting that might just be a little bit tricky? Are there some things that they might have to really think about ahead of time?
One that I would indicate or think of offhand is one of the required designations that a school board must make at the annual meeting, and that's the designation of the legal newspaper. There's a specific section, and it's not in the school law code. It's in chapter 17.2 or -2, dealing with legal newspapers. And so the law says basically if you have a legal newspaper, and to be a legal newspaper, it must meet criteria, must be recognized by the Secretary of State's office. So when in doubt, check with the Secretary of State's office. But if you have a legal newspaper in your district, you have to do your official publications there. If you have two legal newspapers published within your school district, then you may have a choice to make at that point in time. If there is no legal newspaper published within your district, then you go to your resident county as defined by statute. And so if there's ever a question on that kind of scenario, be checking with your school attorney.
Sure, sure. So there could be different scenarios and how that would play out for designation of that. Good. Any other things related to advice for schools with the reorganization meeting?
I would have one, and it's another tricky thing, and it's kind of piggyback on what we talked about last month during our broadcast with the article, and that's with Robert's Rules of Order. A lot of times you'll either through tradition or through policy see boards gravitate to an adoption of Robert's Rules of Order for their parliamentary procedure for running their meetings. As we indicated last month in our article and our broadcast, Robert's Rules of Order were not written for nor designed for the procedure to be used in political subdivisions, local school boards by way of example. So be cautious about just adopting Robert's Rules of Order as your procedure for running your meetings, because that can result in inadvertent issues and problems.
We recommend that they adopt it as a guide, but not necessarily wholeheartedly adopt all the procedures then.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, good, Good. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for this discussion, and I hope that it helps folks to understand what the annual meeting is all about and give you some tips on what to do when you explore that. Thanks for joining us.